The penthouse had been quiet for exactly 8 months, 2 weeks and 3 days. Clara Santos knew this because she counted, not out of obsession, but out of wonder. 8 months since she'd first stepped through those elevator doors into a world she'd only seen in magazines, her worn sneakers sinking into carpet that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. 8 months since a man with eyes like thunderstorms had handed her his most precious possession and said, "Keep her safe." 8 months of bedtime stories and school lunches and scraped knees kissed better, of nightmares soothed and tantrums weathered, and tiny hands reaching for hers in the dark. 8 months of falling in love with a little girl who wasn't hers and never would be. The Marchetti penthouse occupied the entire top floor of one of Manhattan's most exclusive buildings, the kind of address that didn't appear on any map, that you couldn't find unless someone wanted you to find it. That cost more per month than most people earned in a year. 47 floors above the chaos of Fifth Avenue, wrapped in glass and steel and silence, it felt less like an apartment and more like a fortress. A beautiful, lonely fortress where a small girl wandered like a ghost through rooms that had once held her mother's laughter and now held only echoes and expensive furniture. Sofia Marchetti was 5 years old, and she had her father's dark curly hair and her late mother's bright blue eyes. Eyes that had once sparkled with mischief, but now held shadows no child should carry. Shadows that Clara saw every morning when she woke the little girl for school, and every night when she tucked her in and prayed the nightmares would stay away. Her mother, Isabella, had died in a car accident 2 years ago. The official story was a mechanical failure on a rain-slicked road, a tragedy, the newspapers called it, a reminder that wealth couldn't protect you from the random cruelties of fate. The unofficial story, the one whispered by the security staff when they thought no one was listening, the one that made men cross themselves and women clutch their children closer, involved cut brake lines and a rival family whose name made grown men pale and reach for their weapons. Clara didn't ask questions. She'd learned in her first week that questions in the Marchetti household led nowhere good. The head of security had taken her aside after she'd innocently asked why there were so many guards, so many cameras, so many locked doors. "You're here for Sofia," he'd said not unkindly. "Focus on that. Everything else is above your pay grade." So she'd focused. She focused on what she could control, making Sofia smile, helping her sleep through the night without screaming for a mother who would never come, creating small islands of normalcy in a sea of bodyguards and bulletproof glass, and a father who looked at his daughter like she was the only thing keeping him human, the only light in a world that had gone very, very dark. Dante Marchetti. Even thinking his name made something twist in Clara's chest, something she refused to examine too closely, something that felt dangerous and warm and completely inappropriate. He was her employer. He signed her paychecks. He was also, according to every tabloid and federal prosecutor in the tri-state area, one of the most dangerous men on the eastern seaboard, a man whose name was spoken in whispers, whose displeasure could destroy careers and end lives, whose empire stretched from the dockyards of Brooklyn to the boardrooms of Manhattan. The Marchetti family had controlled significant portions of New York's less legitimate economy for 4 generations, building something between a business and a kingdom in the shadows of the city that never slept. Dante had inherited the empire at 25 when his father suffered a fatal heart attack, or so the death certificate claimed, though Clara had noticed that no one who'd been there that night would meet her eyes when the subject came up. Now, at 38, he ran it with the kind of cold efficiency that made his competitors nervous and his allies grateful, that made men twice his age defer to him in meetings, and women half his age throw themselves at him at galas. Clara had seen glimpses of that coldness, the way his voice went flat when he took certain phone calls, as if emotion was a weakness he couldn't afford. The way his men moved around him with the careful deference of people who'd seen what happened to those who disappointed him, who had witnessed the consequences of failure and wanted no part of them. The way violence seemed to cling to him like expensive cologne, invisible but always present, a promise and a threat wrapped in tailored suits and perfect manners. But she'd also seen him at 3 in the morning, sitting on the floor outside Sofia's bedroom door because she'd had a nightmare and he couldn't bear to leave her alone. She'd seen him abandon a room full of very important, very dangerous men because Sofia had a fever and needed him. She'd seen him weep, once, when he thought no one was watching, over a finger painting Sofia had made of her mother. The monster and the man, wrapped in the same skin. Clara couldn't reconcile them, so she stopped trying. She just did her job, collected her very generous paycheck, and pretended she didn't notice the way her heart raced whenever he walked into a room. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Dante was at a business dinner, the kind that required 3 cars of security and probably involved discussions Clara didn't want to know about. Sofia had eaten her pasta, taken her bath, and was currently curled up on the massive sectional sofa in the living room, her dark curls still damp, her favorite dragon book open in her lap. Clara sat beside her, reading aloud in the soft voice she'd perfected over months of bedtime stories, watching Sofia's blue eyes grow heavy with approaching sleep. And the princess looked at the dragon, Clara read, and she wasn't afraid anymore, because she realized that sometimes the scariest things are just lonely, and lonely things need friends too. Sofia's small hand found Clara's and squeezed. "Like Daddy," she said sleepily. "Daddy's scary, but he's just lonely. That's why he needs us." Clara's throat tightened. "That's right, Carino. That's exactly right." She was about to suggest they move to Sofia's bedroom when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong, a soft thump from the private elevator vestibule, then another. Then the unmistakable click of a lock being forced. Clara's blood turned to ice. The penthouse had security measures that would make Fort Knox jealous. Biometric locks, motion sensors, armed guards in the lobby and on the floor below. Nothing should be able to reach them here. Nothing except someone who had already gotten through all of that. She should step back. She should remember her place, remember her paycheck, remember all the reasons why this was a terrible idea that could only end in heartbreak or worse. But the word came out before she could stop it, driven by something deeper than logic, deeper than self-preservation. No. The word came out before she could think, driven by something deeper than fear, deeper than logic. Maternal instinct she didn't know she had, surging up from some ancient place in her bones, from some primordial well of love and protection that transcended blood and biology and every rational consideration. She had known Sofia for 8 months. She had watched her sleep and dried her tears and held her through nightmares and laughed at her jokes. She had loved her quietly, secretly, with the fierce devotion of a woman who knew this child wasn't hers, but whose heart refused to acknowledge the distinction. And now, standing in this hallway, with death staring her in the face, Clara discovered something fundamental about herself. She would rather die than let harm come to this little girl. The realization wasn't frightening. It was clarifying, like a bell ringing in perfect silence, like the moment before dawn when everything becomes possible. "No," she said again, "you're not touching her." The penthouse was designed like a maze, intentionally, Clara now realized. Multiple hallways, multiple routes, multiple places to hide. She'd memorized the layout in her first week, more out of boredom than paranoia. But now that knowledge felt like a gift from a past self who'd somehow known this moment would come. She headed for Sofia's bedroom. It had a panic room built into the closet, a steel-reinforced box with its own air supply and a direct line to Dante's security team. If she could get Sofia inside, if she could seal that door, the little girl would be safe no matter what happened next. The living room was behind them now, but Clara could hear voices, male, professional, speaking in clipped Italian that she recognized from Dante's phone calls. These weren't random burglars. These were professionals. These were men who knew exactly whose home they were invading and had come anyway. That terrified her more than anything else. Sofia clung to her neck, silent as promised, her small body trembling against Clara's chest. Clara could feel her heart beating, rabbit fast, fragile, precious beyond measure. "I won't let them touch you," she thought fiercely. "I won't let them take you. I don't care what it costs." They reached the hallway leading to Sofia's room. 20 feet to the door, 15 feet to the closet, 10 seconds to safety. Clara almost made it. The man stepped out of the shadows like he'd been waiting there all along. Tall, dressed entirely in black, a ski mask obscuring everything except pale eyes that held no emotion at all. He had a gun, compact and professional, and it was pointed directly at Clara's chest. "Stop." His voice was flat, accented, Russian maybe. "Put down the child." Clara stopped. Her arms tightened around Sofia. "No." The word came out before she could think. Driven by something deeper than fear, deeper than logic. Maternal instinct she didn't know she had, surging up from some ancient place in her bones. "No," she said again. "You're not touching her." The man tilted his head, almost amused. "I wasn't asking." 2 more men appeared behind him, materializing from the darkness like they'd been there all along. 3 against 1. 3 armed professionals against a 26-year-old nanny in yoga pants and a cardigan. Clara had never held a gun in her life. She'd never been in a fight more serious than a middle school hair-pulling incident. She had no skills, no training, no weapons. All she had was her body. It would have to be enough. She turned so her back was to the men, shielding Sofia completely. Then she crouched down, set the trembling child on her feet, and positioned herself between Sofia and the guns. "When I say run," she whispered, her lips barely moving, "you run to your closet. You know the code. You get inside and you don't open that door for anyone except your daddy. Do you understand?" "Clara," Sofia's voice was barely a breath. "Don't leave me. I will always be with you, Carino." Clara pressed a kiss to her forehead, fast and fierce. "But right now I need you to be brave. Can you do that for me? Can you be my brave little dragon?" Sofia's chin quivered, but she nodded. Clara straightened, turned, faced the 3 men with their 3 guns and their complete absence of mercy. "She's 5 years old," Clara said, and her voice didn't shake at all. "She's a child. Whatever you want from her father, she can't give it to you. She's innocent." The lead man shrugged. "She's leverage. Same thing. Take me instead." The words fell out of Clara's mouth like stones, heavy, inevitable. "I'm Dante Marchetti's nanny. I live in his home. I know his schedule, his habits, his security protocols. I'm worth more to you than a traumatized little girl who can't tell you anything useful." She spread her arms wide, making herself as large as possible, making herself a shield. "Take me. Let her go." The man studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Brave. Stupid, but brave." He raised his gun. "Unfortunately, our employer was very specific. The girl comes with us. Anyone who gets in the way..." He shrugged again, the gesture almost apologetic. Well, you understand. Clara understood. She understood that she was going to die in the next few seconds. She understood that it wouldn't matter, that they would take Sofia anyway, that her sacrifice would be meaningless. She understood all of that, and she stood her ground anyway, because maybe she could buy a few seconds. Maybe Sofia could run. Maybe, somehow, it would be enough. "Sofia," she said softly, not taking her eyes off the gun. "Run. Now." Sofia ran. The next 5 seconds lasted forever. Clara heard Sofia's small feet pounding against the hardwood floor behind her. She heard the lead man swear and raise his weapon. She heard her own heartbeat thundering in her ears like war drums, like the end of the world, like the loudest sound she would ever hear. And then she moved. She didn't think about it, didn't plan it. Her body simply acted, driven by something older than thought, older than fear. She threw herself forward and to the left, directly into the path between the gunman and the fleeing child. Her arms spread wide, her eyes locked on his. She saw his finger tighten on the trigger. She saw the flash. She felt the impact. Not pain, not yet. Just a massive blow to her left shoulder that spun her halfway around. She hit the wall and slid down it, leaving a dark smear on the expensive wallpaper. And still she didn't fall. Somehow, impossibly, she stayed on her feet. She turned her body, kept herself between the men and the hallway where Sofia had disappeared. Her left arm hung useless at her side, blood spreading across her cardigan in a bloom of crimson, but she was still standing, still blocking the way. "Persistent," the lead man said almost admiringly. He gestured to one of his companions. "Get the girl. I'll handle this." The second man moved toward the hallway. Clara moved to intercept him. She didn't know where she found the strength. Later, she would think about it and wonder if she'd somehow borrowed it from every mother who'd ever stood between her child and danger. Every woman who'd ever faced down the darkness with nothing but love and desperation, and the absolute refusal to let evil win. She collided with the second man, her good arm wrapping around his neck, her body weight bearing him down. They crashed to the floor together, and Clara fought with everything she had, biting, scratching, screaming. Somewhere behind her, she heard the panic room door slam shut, heard the heavy click of the lock engaging, heard Sofia's muffled sobs through the steel, safe, alive, protected. Clara smiled, blood on her teeth, triumph in her failing heart. Then the third man hit her from behind, and the world went dark. She came back to consciousness in pieces. First the pain, a vast ocean of it centered in her shoulder but spreading everywhere. Then the sounds, men arguing in Italian, footsteps on hardwood, a distant siren. Then the cold, the marble floor against her cheek, her blood pooling beneath her, her body shaking with shock she couldn't control. Worthless. The brat locked herself in. We'd need explosives to get through that door, and we don't have time. The boss wanted the girl. What do we tell him? Tell him the nanny got in the way. Tell him we'll try again. He's not going to like that. He's going to like a prison cell even less. Listen to those sirens. Someone triggered the alarm. We need to go. Now. Footsteps receding. A door slamming. Silence. Clara lay on the cold marble and listened to her own ragged breathing. She should move. Should try to get help. Should do something. But her body had finally given up. Every ounce of strength spent on those few desperate seconds of resistance. She'd kept them away from Sofia. That was all that mattered. The little girl was safe behind 3 inches of reinforced steel, probably already connected to Dante's security team, probably already crying for her father. She was alive. She would stay alive. Everything else, including whether Clara made it through the night, was secondary. Clara closed her eyes and let the darkness take her again. She woke to chaos, shouting voices, running feet, someone pressing something against her shoulder that hurt so badly she screamed, the sound tearing from her throat before she could stop it. "She's conscious. Sir, she's conscious. Clara." That voice. She knew that voice. Deep and rough and usually so controlled, but now cracking at the edges like ice over a deep river. "Clara, can you hear me? Look at me. Please look at me." She opened her eyes. Dante Marchetti was on his knees beside her, his immaculate black suit covered in her blood, his usually perfect hair wild from running his hands through it. His face, that face that commanded empires, that made men twice his size flinch, was wet with tears. "There you are." His voice broke on the words. "There you are. Stay with me, okay? The ambulance is coming. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine." She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. Sofia, safe. He gathered her into his arms, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. "She's safe. Because of you. You saved her. You—" His voice failed. He pressed his face against her hair and held her, his massive shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs, his hands gentle despite the blood. "You stood between her and a gun," he whispered. "You took a bullet for my daughter. Why? Why would you do that?" Clara's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "Because she's mine too," she breathed. "Even if she's not, she's mine." Dante made a sound, raw, broken, something between a sob and a laugh. "You beautiful, impossible woman." He held her tighter. "Don't you dare die on me. Do you understand? That's an order." "You're not my boss right now," she murmured, her eyes drifting closed. "Right now, you're just Dante." The last thing she heard before the darkness claimed her again was his voice, repeating her name like a prayer. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells, and people in scrubs moving with urgent purpose, their sneakers squeaking on linoleum that had seen 1,000 tragedies and would see 1,000 more. Dante Marchetti stood in the middle of it like a stone in a river, letting the chaos flow around him without touching him, his eyes fixed on the doors through which they'd taken Clara 47 minutes ago. 47 minutes and 16 seconds to be precise. He was counting. Couldn't stop counting. 47 minutes of not knowing if she was alive or dead, if she was breathing or bleeding out on a table, if the bullet that had torn through her shoulder had done something irreparable to the woman who had become irreplaceable without his permission. 47 minutes of replaying those security camera feeds in his mind, watching her run with Sofia in her arms, her face a mask of controlled terror, watching her face down 3-armed men with nothing but her body as a shield, watching her spread her arms wide like wings, like a wall, like the only thing standing between his daughter and the abyss, watching her take a bullet and keep standing through sheer force of will, through something that looked like magic or madness or the purest form of love he'd ever witnessed. He'd watched men die before. He'd caused men to die before, with his orders, with his hands, with the cold calculations of a man who understood that power required sacrifice, and sacrifice required blood. He'd thought he understood courage, understood sacrifice, understood what it meant to face death without flinching. He hadn't understood anything. Marco appeared at his elbow, his phone pressed to his ear, his face grim. "Boss, we need to talk." "Not now." "Sir, not now." The words came out ice cold, edged with a violence that made even Marco, who'd served beside him for 15 years, who'd seen him at his worst and stayed anyway, take a step back. Dante didn't care. He couldn't think about business right now. Couldn't think about retaliation. Couldn't think about who had sent those men. Couldn't think about anything except the blood on his hands that was drying to rust-brown scales. Clara's blood. She was 26 years old. She made Sofia laugh. She sang Spanish lullabies in a voice like warm honey. She'd worked for him for 8 months, and in all that time, he'd never let himself look at her too long. Never let himself acknowledge the way his chest tightened whenever she smiled. She was the help. She was off limits. She was everything good and pure and bright that he had no right to touch with his blood-stained hands. And she'd thrown herself in front of a gun for his daughter. Not because she was paid to. Not because she was trained to. Simply because she loved Sofia. And love, real love, the kind that burned clean and true, didn't calculate the cost before it acted. The doors opened. A doctor in surgical scrubs emerged, her face professionally neutral. Dante was in front of her before she'd taken 2 steps, his hand closing around her arm with just enough pressure to command her full attention. Clara Santos, the woman they brought in with the gunshot wound, is she? She's alive. The doctor extracted her arm from his grip with practiced calm. The bullet passed through her shoulder. Without hitting any major arteries, she lost a significant amount of blood, and she'll need physical therapy for the muscle damage, but she's gonna make a full recovery. Dante's knees buckled. He caught himself on the wall, pressing his forehead against the cool plaster, dragging air into lungs that had forgotten how to breathe. Alive. She was alive. She's asking for someone, the doctor continued, consulting her chart. A Sofia? She keeps saying the name. Is that her daughter? The lie came automatically, smooth and natural. Sofia is her daughter. She's safe at home. Good. That should help with the recovery. She'll be in room 412 once we move her out of post-op. Family only for the next few hours, but I'm family. The doctor looked at him. Really looked. Taking in the blood on his suit, the tears he hadn't bothered to hide, the desperate intensity in his eyes. Whatever she saw made her nod slowly. Room 412. Give us 30 minutes. She disappeared back through the doors, and Dante slid down the wall until he was sitting on the cold hospital floor. His designer suit be damned. His reputation be damned. Everything be damned except the fact that Clara Santos was alive and asking for Sofia. And he was going to spend the rest of his life making sure nothing ever hurt her again. Marco crouched beside him. Boss, I'm sorry to push, but we identified the men. Victor Conti's people. Dante's head came up slowly. His eyes, which had been soft with relief moments ago, went flat and cold and utterly without mercy. Conti. His son died 3 years ago, during the thing with the shipments. He's been waiting for payback ever since. Apparently decided to take it out on Sofia. And Clara. Collateral damage. They didn't expect her to fight. Nobody expected. Marco's voice caught slightly. Nobody expected what she did. Dante was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm. The deadly calm of a man who had already made a decision and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. I want Conti found. I want everyone who touched this operation found. I want their names, their families, their favorite foods, the names of their childhood pets. He stood, brushing off his ruined suit with deliberate precision. And then, I want them brought to me, alive. I have questions I'd like to ask in person. Marco nodded once, his face betraying nothing. And the girl? Clara. The girl, Downey said quietly, is under my protection now. Anyone who looks at her wrong, anyone who speaks her name without respect, anyone who even thinks about using her to get to me, they answer to me directly. Is that clear? Crystal. Good. Dante straightened his tie. Absurd, given the blood still visible on his collar, and walked toward the elevators. Now, get me everything you have on Conti's operation. I have 30 minutes before I can see Clara, and I intend to use them productively. Clara woke to white walls, beeping monitors, and the distant murmur of hospital sounds. Her shoulder throbbed with a deep, persistent ache that even the medications couldn't fully dull. But beneath the pain was something else, a floating lightness that she eventually recognized as heavy-duty painkillers. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Don't move. The voice came from the chair beside her bed, deep, familiar and rough with exhaustion. Clara turned her head slowly and found Dante Marchetti watching her with eyes that looked like he hadn't slept in days. He was still wearing the blood-stained suit, though someone had made an attempt to clean the worst of it. His hair was a disaster, his jaw dark with stubble, and the circles under his eyes made him look 10 years older than he was. He was also holding her hand. She didn't remember him taking it. Didn't know when it had happened or how long he'd been sitting there, but his fingers were wrapped around hers like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. And that touch, gentle, desperate, utterly at odds with the dangerous man she knew him to be, made something crack open in her chest. Sofia? Her voice came out as a croak. He leaned forward immediately, reaching for the cup of water on the bedside table, holding the straw to her lips with a tenderness that made her want to cry. Safe. She's at my mother's house with 6 armed guards and instructions not to let her out of their sight. She's been asking about you constantly. Drew you 17 pictures while you were in surgery. Clara's lips twitched. Only 17? She's pacing herself. He set the cup down but didn't let go of her hand. Clara, what you did, don't... She squeezed his fingers weakly. Don't make it into a thing. She's a little girl. She was scared. I did what anyone would do. No. The word came out fierce, almost angry. That's exactly wrong. You did what nobody does. You stood in front of a gun. You took a bullet. You fought 3 armed men with your bare hands to give her 10 seconds to reach safety. His voice cracked. I've commanded armies of men who wouldn't have done what you did. I've paid millions of dollars to people trained their entire lives for exactly that situation. And none of them would have stayed standing after that first shot. You did. You kept fighting. You saved her. Clara stared at him, seeing the cracks in his composure, the rawness beneath the armor he always wore. You're crying, she said softly. You've been crying. I thought you were dead. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. When I saw the security footage, when I saw you go down, I thought you were dead. And I realized, he looked away, his jaw working. I realized I couldn't imagine a world without you in it. I realized I'd been lying to myself for 8 months, pretending I didn't feel... He stopped, shook his head. This isn't the time. You need rest. You need to heal. We can talk about this later or never or... Dante. She tugged on his hand until he looked at her. I've been lying too. Something shifted in his expression. Hope and fear and desperate longing, all tangled together in those dark eyes. Clara, I know who you are. I know what you do. I know there are probably 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea. She smiled, soft and tired and absolutely certain. But I also know that when I was standing in front of those men, convinced I was about to die, My only regret was that I never told you how I felt. That I never let you know that somewhere in the last 8 months, between the bedtime stories and the pasta dinners and the 3 a.m. nightmare watches, I fell in love with you, with both of you, with this broken, beautiful family that never should have felt like mine but does. Dante made a sound, raw, wounded, almost a sob. He brought her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss against her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "I'm not asking for what you deserve. I'm telling you what I want." She reached up with her good hand, slowly, carefully, and touched his face. The stubble rasped against her palm. The tears tracked over her fingers. "I want this, Dante. I want Sofia. I want you. I want to stop pretending that going home at night to my empty apartment doesn't feel like exile. I want to be here, with both of you, building something real. It's dangerous, being with me, loving me. You've already seen, I've already bled for this family." Her voice was quiet but firm. "I think I've earned the right to decide if the risk is worth it. And it is. You are. Both of you are." He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed. Some final wall crumbling, some last defense surrendered. "Then you're mine," he said, low and fierce, "and Sofia's, and we're yours. And anyone who tries to hurt you ever again will learn exactly what happens when you threaten something that belongs to Dante Marchetti." It should have sounded possessive, controlling, all the red flags she'd been taught to watch for. Instead, it sounded like a vow, like a promise, like the first words of a future she'd never dared to imagine. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of hospital rooms, physical therapy sessions, and flowers. So many flowers. They arrived daily, elaborate arrangements from Dante, crayon drawings from Sofia, and eventually, reluctantly, a single white orchid from Elena Marchetti with a card that read simply, "Thank you." Coming from Dante's mother, Clara had learned that was practically a declaration of eternal love. Sofia visited every day, climbing carefully onto the bed to curl against Clara's good side, chattering about school and her drawings and the dragon book they still hadn't finished. She was resilient in the way only children could be, already processing the trauma, already moving forward, already treating Clara's injury as simply another adventure in their ongoing story. "When you come home," Sofia said seriously one afternoon, "you should sleep in the big bedroom with Daddy. That way, if bad guys come again, you'll both be there to fight them." Clara choked on her water. Dante, who'd been pretending to read documents in the corner chair, went very still. "Sofia, honey, that's not exactly how. Maria at school says when mommies and daddies love each other, they share a room. And you love Clara, right, Daddy? And Clara loves you. I heard you say it when you thought I was asleep." The silence stretched. Clara could feel her face burning, could see the matching flush creeping up Dante's neck above his collar. "Sofia," he said carefully, setting aside his papers, "adult relationships are complicated. Why? Because," he glanced at Clara helplessly, "because sometimes people need time to figure things out, to make sure they're making the right choice." Sofia considered this with the devastating logic of a 5-year-old. "But Clara already got shot for us." "That seems pretty figured out to me." Clara laughed. She couldn't help it, and the sound broke whatever tension had been building. Dante's lips twitched, then curved into a full smile, and suddenly they were both laughing, tears streaming down their faces while Sofia looked between them with patient confusion. "I think," Clara finally managed, wiping her eyes with her good hand, that Sofia might be the smartest person in this family. She gets it from her mother, Dante said, and there was no sadness in his voice, just warmth, just acceptance, just the quiet peace of a man who had finally learned to hold his grief and his joy in the same heart. So, does that mean you'll share the room? Sofia pressed. Clara looked at Dante. Dante looked at Clara. Let's take it one step at a time, Piccola, he said. But his eyes were making promises that had nothing to do with patience. Clara was discharged on a Tuesday afternoon, with strict instructions about physical therapy and medication schedules, and all the things she was absolutely not allowed to do for at least another month. Dante ignored all of it, scooping her up from the wheelchair and carrying her to the waiting car like she weighed nothing at all. I can walk, she protested, though her arms had somehow found their way around his neck. You can also let someone take care of you for once. He settled her into the back seat of the SUV, then climbed in beside her, his hand immediately finding hers. I've been doing some thinking while you were recovering. That sounds dangerous. He smiled, but it faded quickly into something more serious. The men who came for Sofia, they've been dealt with. Clara's stomach tightened. Dealt with how? The ones who survived your extremely impressive resistance are currently answering questions at a secure location. The ones who didn't survive, he shrugged, made their choice. And the man who sent them? Victor Conti? Dante's expression went cold. He's been invited to a meeting, one he can't refuse. It's scheduled for tomorrow night. You're going to kill him. It wasn't a question. I'm going to have a conversation with him about the consequences of threatening my family. His eyes met hers, and she saw the monster she'd always known live beneath the man. If that conversation ends badly for him, that's his choice, not mine. Clara should have been horrified. She was a good person, or at least, she'd always thought she was. Good people didn't accept this, didn't condone it, didn't sit calmly in the back of an armored car while the man they loved discussed murder like a business transaction. But then she remembered Sofia's face, twisted with terror, remembered the gun pointed at her chest, remembered the way those men had talked about a little girl like she was a bargaining chip, a means to an end, a thing to be taken and used and discarded. Will it be quick? She asked quietly. Quicker than he deserves. She nodded once. Then I don't need to know anymore. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Surprise, maybe, or understanding, or a kind of love that recognized its own reflection. You're not who I thought you were, he said. Is that bad? No. He lifted her hand to his lips. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. The penthouse had been transformed in her absence. Fresh flowers in every room, new artwork on the walls, including, she noticed with a lump in her throat, a framed collection of Sofia's drawings featuring a curly-haired woman fighting dragons. Her clothes had been moved from the small staff apartment on the lower floor to the master suite's walk-in closet, arranged with careful precision beside Dante's suits and shirts. I can have them moved back, Dante said, watching her face. If this is too much, too fast, I don't want to pressure you into anything you're not ready for. Clara turned to look at him. This man who commanded an empire with an iron fist, who made grown men tremble with a glance, who was currently fidgeting like a nervous teenager asking a girl to prom. Sofia will be thrilled, she said, and kissed him. It was their first real kiss, not the desperate press of lips in a hospital room, not the careful brushes of comfort during her recovery, but a real kiss. The kind that started soft and turned hungry, the kind that made his hands grip her waist and her fingers tangle in his hair. The kind that made them both forget about physical therapy restrictions until Clara gasped in pain and Dante pulled back like he'd been burned. "Your shoulder. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "Stop apologizing." She pulled him back down with her good arm. "Just be gentle." He was gentle, achingly, reverently gentle. He kissed her like she was something precious, something sacred, something he'd been afraid to touch for so long that now he couldn't stop. He carried her to the bed and laid her down like she was made of spun glass, and then proceeded to worship every inch of her that didn't hurt, and some that did, because she couldn't bring herself to tell him to stop. Afterward, tangled together in sheets that probably cost more than her old apartment's rent, Clara traced the serpent tattoo that coiled up his forearm and finally asked the question she'd been wondering about for months. "What does it mean?" "My father had one like it, and his father before him. It's a family tradition, marking the heir when they come of age." His voice was drowsy, relaxed in a way she'd never heard before. "The serpent represents wisdom, cunning, patience, the ability to wait for the right moment to strike. Do you regret it? The life you inherited?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I used to. After Isabella died, I wanted to burn it all down. Walk away. Take Sofia and disappear to some beach somewhere and pretend the Marchetti name didn't exist." His arm tightened around her. "But you can't escape what you are. You can only try to be the best version of it. I've spent the last 2 years trying to move my family's business toward legitimacy. It's slow, painful. Some things will never be clean. But I'm trying." "Is that why Conti came after Sofia? Because you're trying to change things?" "Partly. And partly because I killed his son 3 years ago." Clara went still. Dante felt her tension and sighed. "Bruno Conti was running a human trafficking operation using our shipping routes. Girls, some of them children." His voice hardened. "I gave him one chance to shut it down. He declined. So I shut him down instead." "You killed him." "I killed a monster who was destroying lives for profit. His father has spent every day since then plotting revenge. The only thing that surprised me about the attack was how long it took him to act." Clara processed this. The man beside her had killed before, would kill again, had built his entire life on a foundation of violence and power and moral compromises she couldn't begin to understand. And yet, "I'm glad he's dead," she said quietly. "Bruno Conti, the man who hurt those girls. I'm glad you stopped him." Dante pulled back enough to see her face, his eyes searching. "Most people would run away screaming right about now. Most people weren't raised by a grandmother who survived a civil war." Clara smiled slightly. "She used to say that the world isn't divided into good people and bad people. It's divided into people who protect the innocent and people who prey on them. The methods matter less than the mission. Your grandmother sounds like she would have gotten along with my mother. God forbid. But she was smiling, and so was he, and somehow, impossibly, improbably, this felt right. This felt like home." Sofia burst through the bedroom door at 6 a.m. the next morning, launching herself onto the bed with the enthusiasm of a small cannon. "You're here. Clara's really here. Daddy, you didn't make it up. I told you she was staying." Dante caught his daughter mid-bounce and settled her between them. "Have I ever lied to you? You said vegetables taste good. That's not a lie. That's optimistic marketing." Clara laughed, pulling Sofia close and pressing a kiss to her tangled curls. The little girl smelled like sleep and strawberry shampoo and everything good in the world. And Clara thought, yes, this is worth everything. Worth the bullet. Worth the danger. worth the compromises she'd have to make and the truth she'd have to accept. This family, broken and beautiful and fierce, was hers now, and she would fight to keep it. The meeting with Victor Conti happened 3 nights later in a warehouse on the Brooklyn waterfront that had been in the Marchetti family for 4 generations. Clara wasn't there. Dante had been absolutely firm about that, but she watched it happen anyway. Through the security feed Marco had set up in the penthouse study, she told herself it was because she needed to know, needed to understand exactly what kind of man she'd chosen to love, needed to see the monster as clearly as she saw the man. But the truth was simpler than that. She watched because she wanted to see Victor Conti pay for what he'd tried to do to Sofia, for the nightmares the little girl still had, for the scar that would mark Clara's shoulder for the rest of her life, for the terror she'd felt standing in that hallway, knowing she was about to die, and choosing to die, standing anyway. Conti was brought in bound and gagged, thrown to his knees on the concrete floor by men who handled him like the garbage he was. Dante stood over him in his perfect black suit, the serpent tattoo visible where he'd rolled up his sleeves, and there was nothing human in his eyes. Victor. His voice was conversational, almost pleasant. Thank you for accepting my invitation. The gag was removed. Conti spat blood and glared up with hatred that burned like acid. You think this ends anything, Marchetti? You think killing me stops what's coming? There are 100 men who want you dead. 1,000. You can't kill us all. No. Dante crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with the bound man. But I can make an example of you. I can make sure that every one of those 100 men, those 1,000 men, knows exactly what happens when you threaten my daughter. He pulled a phone from his pocket and held up the screen, showing the security footage from the penthouse. The footage of Clara standing with her arms spread wide. The footage of her taking the bullet. The footage of her falling and getting back up and fighting with her bare hands against 3 armed men. Do you see that woman, Victor? She works for me. She makes my daughter's lunch and reads her bedtime stories and earns less in a year than you spend on wine. And she did more to protect my family in 30 seconds than your entire organization could accomplish in 30 years. Dante's voice dropped to something soft and terrible. She nearly died because of you. She has a scar now that she'll carry forever because of you. And you're going to answer for that. What happened next was brutal and efficient and lasted much longer than Clara had expected. She watched all of it, didn't look away even when she wanted to. When it was over, when Victor Conti had given up every name, every plan, every piece of information he possessed, and then given up something more fundamental than that, Dante looked directly at the security camera, looked at her. Come home, Clara whispered to the empty study. Just come home. He did. 3 hours later, showered and changed into soft clothes, he slipped into bed beside her and pulled her close without saying a word. She could smell soap on his skin, could feel the tension slowly draining from his muscles, could sense the weight he was carrying and always would carry. Is it done? She asked. It's done. Conti's organization is finished. The men who broke into our home are no longer a concern. Sofia is safe. His arms tightened around her. You're safe. And you? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how to be safe. I don't know if I ever will be. This life, my life, it doesn't allow for safety, only for preparation, only for strength, only for making the cost of hurting us so high that no one dares to try. That sounds exhausting. It is. He pressed his face into her hair. But it's also the only way I know how to love. By protecting. By fighting. by being the monster so the people I care about don't have to be. Clara turned in his arms until she could see his face, the strong features, the tired eyes, the mouth that could order death or whisper endearments with equal ease. "Then let me be your rest," she said. "Let me be the place you come to when the fighting's done. The person who sees both versions of you and loves them both. The one who doesn't need you to be anything other than what you are." Dante's eyes closed. When they opened again, they were wet. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to love someone without trying to control them, without trying to lock them away where nothing can hurt them." Isabella hated it. "It's part of why." He stopped, swallowed. "She was trying to leave the night she died. Did you know that? She'd packed bags for her and Sofia. She was going to her sister's house. She said she couldn't breathe anymore. That loving me was like living in a beautiful prison, and she'd rather be free and poor than trapped and comfortable." The confession hung between them, heavy with old grief and older guilt. "I killed her," he said. "Not with my hands, not directly. But my life, my choices, my inability to be anything other than what I am. That's what put her on that road in the rain. That's what made her desperate enough to flee without telling anyone. And Conti's people were watching, waiting for exactly that kind of opportunity." His voice broke. "I killed my wife by loving her too much, by holding on so tight she couldn't breathe. And I've spent 2 years terrified of doing the same thing to Sofia. To anyone." Clara cupped his face in her hands, feeling the tears hot against her palms. "I'm not Isabella. I know. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to suffocate. I knew exactly who you were when I decided to love you, Dante. I made this choice with my eyes open and my heart willing, and my shoulders still aching from the last time your world tried to swallow me whole." She kissed him softly. "I'm not asking you to change. I'm not asking you to be less than you are. I'm just asking you to trust me, to be strong enough to stand beside you, to fight with you instead of against you, to be your partner, not your prisoner." He stared at her like she'd handed him something precious and impossible. "How are you real?" "I could ask you the same thing." She smiled. "Now stop thinking so hard and hold me. We can figure out the rest tomorrow." 6 months later, the penthouse had transformed again, not in its furniture or its layout, but in its atmosphere, in its soul, in the invisible energy that filled every room and corridor. Where once it had felt like a fortress, beautiful but cold, a museum of grief and expensive emptiness, now it felt like a home, a real home, with all the chaos and warmth and imperfection that implied. Sofia's artwork covered the refrigerator, layer upon layer of crayon drawings depicting their little family in various adventures, fighting dragons, riding unicorns, having picnics on clouds. Clara's books spilled from every surface, paperbacks with cracked spines and dog-eared pages, poetry collections and mystery novels, and the language textbooks she still studied in quiet moments. The sound of laughter echoed through rooms that had known only silence for so long, bouncing off walls that had absorbed 2 years of whispered grief, and finally getting the chance to amplify joy instead. There were toys in the hallways now, small obstacles that Dante pretended to grumble about and secretly loved. There were crayon marks on the wall near the kitchen that Clara kept meaning to clean and never quite got around to. There was life, messy and loud and wonderful, filling every corner of a space that had almost become a mausoleum. And in the center of it all, holding everything together with fierce devotion and increasingly domestic competence, was Dante Marchetti, former monster, current father, and the man Clara planned to spend the rest of her life with. Not that she told him that yet. Not in so many words. They were taking things slow. Well, slow by Marchetti standards, which meant they'd only moved in together after 3 months instead of 3 days. And Dante had only proposed twice before Clara told him she needed more time. More time for what? He'd asked, genuinely confused. We love each other. Sofia adores you. My mother has stopped threatening to have you investigated by the FBI. What else is there? Normal relationship milestones, dating, anniversaries, getting to know each other outside of life-threatening situations. We've had 6 months of date nights, 3 weekend trips, and I've memorized your coffee order, your shoe size, and the exact sound you make when... Okay. She'd kissed him to shut him up. Just let me get used to this. Let me believe it's real. He'd agreed reluctantly and settled for buying her increasingly expensive gifts that she kept trying to return, and he kept finding ways to make her keep. The latest was a first-edition collection of Spanish poetry that had belonged to Pablo Neruda himself. It's too much, she'd said. It's not enough, he'd replied. Nothing will ever be enough. Today was Sofia's birthday, her 6th, the first one Clara would celebrate as an official member of the family. The party was elaborate by any normal standard and modest by Marchetti standards. Only 50 guests, only 3 bouncy castles, only 1 pony. Sofia was in heaven. Clara watched from the terrace as the little girl raced between attractions with her friends, her dark curls flying, her laughter carrying on the warm spring breeze. The scar on Clara's shoulder twinged with the memory of why this moment had almost never happened. But the pain was fading now, becoming just another part of the story. Just another chapter in the improbable tale of how a nanny fell in love with a monster who turned out to be a man. You're thinking too hard. Dante appeared beside her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. That's my line. I'm branching out. He handed her a glass and leaned against the railing, his shoulder brushing hers. Happy? Deliriously. She sipped the champagne. Expensive, of course, probably older than she was. Are you? I don't have a word for what I am. He turned to look at her, and his eyes held something she'd never seen before. Peace. 6 months ago, I was a man who'd lost everything that mattered and was just going through the motions. Now I have Sofia laughing again. I have you in my bed every morning. I have a future I actually want to live long enough to see. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I know you said you needed time. I know I promised to wait. But I'm not proposing again. Not yet. I just wanted you to have this. Clara took the box with trembling fingers. Inside was a ring, not a diamond, but a deep green emerald surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light like captured stars. It was my grandmother's, Dante said quietly. She wore it for 63 years, through a marriage that survived wars and famines and the building of an empire. She told me once that the emerald represented endurance, the ability to stay green and growing even when everything around you is trying to burn you down. He closed her fingers around the box. I'm not asking you to marry me today. I'm asking you to wear this so I can look at your hand and know that someday, whenever you're ready, you will. And in the meantime, it can remind you that you're mine, that you belong here, that this is your family now, for as long as you want it. Clara looked at the ring, looked at him, looked at Sofia spinning in circles on the lawn below, surrounded by joy and safety and the future she'd almost died to protect. I lied, she said, about needing time. Dante went very still. I've known since the hospital. since you held my hand and cried and told me you couldn't imagine a world without me in it." She slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, because of course it was. I was just scared. Scared that if I said yes too fast, I'd wake up and find out it was all a dream. That I'd blink and be back in my empty apartment, reading job listings, trying to remember what your voice sounded like. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. But I'm not scared anymore. I'm ready. I'm saying yes, Dante. Yes to the ring. Yes to the proposal you keep pretending you're not making. Yes to being Sofia's mother and your wife, and part of this beautiful, terrifying, impossible family. Dante made a sound she'd never heard from him before, something between a laugh and a sob, and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like champagne and salt and forever. Below them, Sofia looked up from her game and saw them embracing. Her shriek of excitement could probably be heard in New Jersey. Clara said yes. Daddy, Clara said yes. Does this mean I get to be a flower girl? The party devolved into chaos after that. Congratulations and questions, and Elena Marchetti appearing from nowhere to inspect the ring with the critical eye of a woman who had very specific opinions about jewelry. But through all of it, Dante never let go of Clara's hand, and Clara never wanted him to. The wedding was held on a September afternoon in the garden of the Marchetti estate on Long Island, a sprawling property that had been in the family for 3 generations and had seen everything from christenings to funerals to at least 2 incidents that Clara had decided she didn't want to know more about. The weather was perfect, because of course it was. Clara had learned that Marchetti events always had perfect weather, and she'd stopped questioning whether that was luck or something more deliberate. 200 guests filled the white chairs arranged on the immaculate lawn, their designer outfits rustling in the gentle breeze, their champagne flutes catching the afternoon sun. Half of them were probably criminals, Clara reflected. The other half were probably politicians, which was arguably worse. She wore her mother's dress, simple white silk that had traveled from Santo Domingo to New York 40 years ago, carefully preserved in tissue paper and hope, and still fit like it had been made for her. Her grandmother had cried when Clara had tried it on, had pressed weathered hands to her cheeks and whispered prayers in Spanish, had told her that her mother was watching from heaven and weeping with joy. Sofia was the flower girl, as demanded, and took her responsibility so seriously that she reduced 3 hardened Marchetti soldiers to tears with her solemn procession down the aisle. She wore a miniature version of Clara's dress, Dante's idea, executed flawlessly by a designer who probably shouldn't have had time to create custom children's couture in 2 weeks, but somehow did. And her dark curls were crowned with white roses that matched the bouquet she scattered with painstaking precision. Dante waited at the altar in a black suit that probably cost more than Clara's childhood home, and cried openly when he saw her walking toward him. So much for the terrifying mob boss, she thought, her own eyes filling with tears she couldn't stop. So much for the monster of the eastern seaboard. But she was crying too. And so was his mother, and so was Marco, who would deny it later under pain of death. So she couldn't exactly judge. The ceremony was traditional, vows spoken in English and Italian, rings exchanged, a kiss that went on slightly longer than was strictly appropriate for a family event. Sofia cheered so loudly that several birds took flight from nearby trees. The reception was everything Clara had expected from a Marchetti celebration, excessive, elegant, and vaguely terrifying in its scale. She danced with Dante, with Marco, with 3 different men whose names she didn't catch, but whose scarred knuckles suggested she probably shouldn't ask about their professions. She ate cake that had been flown in from Italy. She caught the bouquet and immediately handed it to Elena Marchetti, who looked genuinely surprised for the first time since Clara had met her. And through it all, She kept looking at the ring on her finger, the emerald that represented endurance, that had survived 63 years on another woman's hand, that now marked Clara as part of something larger than herself. As the sun began to set and the party showed no signs of slowing down, Dante found her standing alone at the edge of the garden, looking out over the Long Island Sound. "Escaping already, Mrs. Marchetti?" The name sent a shiver down her spine. The good kind. "Just taking it in. Trying to believe this is actually my life now." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "Is it what you expected? When you took that job as a nanny, did you ever imagine you'd end up here?" Clara laughed. "God, no. I expected 6 months of professional experience and a decent reference. Instead, I got shot at, proposed to by a mob boss, and adopted by a 5-year-old who insists on calling me Mama Clara, even though I've told her 1,000 times that just Clara is fine. She loves you. She wants everyone to know you're her mother." His voice softened. "Is that okay? I know she's not biologically yours. I know you didn't sign up for instant motherhood when you answered that job listing." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "She's mine," she said simply. "She was mine from the moment she fell asleep in my lap, reading that dragon book. The biology doesn't matter. The timing doesn't matter. She's my daughter, and I will fight anyone who suggests otherwise, including you." Dante smiled, that soft, wondering smile that still surprised her every time she saw it. "I love you. I know." "No." He cupped her face in his hands, those scarred, dangerous hands that had become her favorite place to be held. "I mean it. I love you in a way I didn't know I was capable of, in a way that terrifies me and completes me, and makes me want to be better than I've ever been." Clara leaned into his touch. "Then be better. Be the man Sofia deserves. Be the husband I'm trusting you to be. Be the version of yourself that builds instead of destroys, that protects without possessing, that loves without caging." She kissed him softly. "That's all I ask. That you keep trying. That we keep trying together. Forever, forever." Behind them, the party continued. Music and laughter and the clinking of glasses raised in celebration. Somewhere in the crowd, Sofia was teaching Marco to do the Macarena, with results that would probably become family legend. Elena Marchetti was arguing with the caterer about proper presentation of tiramisu. A group of men who had definitely committed multiple felonies were singing sentimental Italian songs around a table full of empty wine bottles. It was chaos. It was family. It was home. "You know," Clara said, "if someone had told me a year ago that I'd end up married to the most dangerous man on the East Coast, I would have laughed in their face. And now I'd tell them that the most dangerous man on the East Coast makes excellent pancakes and cries during Disney movies and is absolutely terrified of his own mother." She grinned. "Also that he's mine, so they should probably back off." Dante laughed, a real laugh, full and warm and free. "I love you, Clara Marchetti." "I love you too, Dante Marchetti." She took his hand and led him back toward the light and noise and beautiful chaos of their wedding reception. "Now, come on. I think your consigliere is about to do the worm, and I refuse to miss that." They walked into the crowd together, hand in hand, two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen to build something worth protecting, something worth fighting for, something worth dying for, and more importantly, something worth living for. The music swelled around them as they joined the dance floor, as Sofia ran up to grab both their hands and demand to be lifted between them, as the Marchetti family and all its complicated, dangerous, beautiful members celebrated the union of their boss with a woman who had proven herself worthy in the most primal way possible. Clara Santos, Clara Marchetti now, had come to New York with nothing but hope and a work ethic and the stubborn determination to build something from nothing. She'd answered a job listing for a nanny position and found herself in a world of violence and wealth and love fiercer than anything she'd ever known. She'd stood between a child and a bullet. She'd faced down men who killed for a living, armed with nothing but her body and her will. She'd fallen in love with a monster who turned out to be a man, and in doing so, she'd transformed them both into something neither could have been alone. If you were Clara, standing in that hallway with a gun pointed at your chest and a little girl trembling behind you, would you have stayed? Would you have made yourself a shield? Would you have traded your life for a child who wasn't yours? A family that wasn't yours? A future you had no right to claim? Or would you have run and hoped for the best? Tell me in the comments, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting or running. It's standing still. It's putting your body between the darkness and the light. It's saying, you'll have to go through me, and meaning it. Sometimes courage looks like a woman in a cardigan, spreading her arms wide, choosing love over fear. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that courage is rewarded with everything you never dared to dream of.